All right, so warm welcome from my side to the MuSES Grand Finale, which basically is a session which wraps up the entire findings of this exciting project called MuSES, which stands for the Multi-Scale Energy Systems for Low Carbon Cities project. The MuSES project is part of the Future Cities Laboratory program of the ETH Zurich, here based in Singapore, which has been sponsored by the National Research Foundation, who we remain immensely grateful for their support. The MuSES project, what it makes it very interesting is that we're looking to basically build our understanding about how cities could become or could operate in a low carbon, let's say, future. And for this, we explore synergies between urban design, building operations, as well as energy engineering. During this session, we're going to be talking about different aspects about what makes the MuSES project unique and what are the main findings we have achieved across these last 4 years of research. So for today, we have a very interesting agenda that we have put together for the entire afternoon. At this point, I know that there are some people connecting from Europe as well as North America. I much appreciate that you're connecting, acknowledging that it's late evening or early hours of the morning in your respective locations. Thank you very much for joining us. The agenda that we have prepared for today is as follows. It consists of mainly 4 points. During the first part of the session, which is session number 1, we will have Professor Dr. Arnold Schluter and Professor Dr. Francois Maréchal, leaders and co-leaders respectively of the MuSES project, introducing us to the main motivation, research questions, as well as the structure of this project, letting us know what it makes it unique and what things we have found along the way. This session will last for a total of 25 minutes. During the first 15 minutes, we will have the presentation and it will be followed by a Q&A of 10 minutes. For all attendees, kindly, you can press the button of Q&A in your Zoom platform, and please put at any point of time any question you may have for the panelists. I will be sorting and filtering those questions, and during the Q&A session, I will be saying the questions aloud, and I will expect the panelists to answer them during what time allows, basically. All right, after that session, knowing a little bit more about what MuSES is, we're gonna have a deep dive into the different sub-projects of MuSES. And during this session, we're gonna take a little bit more time of talking about the different aspects that form this project. We're going to be talking about data, about occupancy, about energy demand, topics related to low carbon technology. And we're going to be also putting ourselves the lens of urban designers who actually have a great say on how these low carbon cities can look like in the future. We're going to be talking about a project about this. And we'll be concluding finally this session talking about the City Energy Analyst tool, a leading software for the analysis of district energy systems, which has been strongly developed as part of the MuSES project. After finishing this session, we'll have a break for about 10 minutes, should time allow, of course. And if not, then we'll go straight away to our third and mostly the final session of the day of presentations. During this session, we're gonna just shift gears a little bit, and we're gonna be having elevator pitches about different projects that have branched out throughout the last 4 years from the MuSES project, and which we believe that it can strongly contribute to create this narrative about what multi-scale energy systems can look like in the future. We have different guest speakers joining us, and I thank very much them for joining us today. This session will work in a format of 5 minutes elevator pitch with some some slides, and followed by 5 minutes of a Q&A. After finishing this session, then we will go to the final session of the day, where we will have some few remarks by our principal investigators and leaders of the MuSES project. And we will open the floor for the entire audience to give us their perspectives as well as their questions regarding the project and the session. All right. So with nothing else to say, no further ado, I wish us all a great afternoon of presentations, a great discussion, a lot of ideas, and building more intuition, hopefully, about what multi-scale energy systems could look like in the future. Now, with that said, I would like to welcome our first panelist, Professor Dr. Arno Schluter. I will be introducing you to Professor Schluter while he pulls up his slides. So Professor Arno Schluter is the leader of the multi-scale energy system for low carbon cities project. He and his team at the ETH Zurich research on active and passive systems for the energy supply and climate control of buildings. He has some research projects and case studies at various scales, ranging from design to operation, from building to districts. And he's also the leader of the chair of architecture and building systems of the ETH Zurich. So I hope, Arno, you can join us.
Yep, I'm here, but I cannot share unless you stop sharing, or you have to assign me the rights to share. Okay, here we go.
Please try again.
Yes. All right, seems to work now.
Fantastic. Great, Arno.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, Jimeno. Hello, everyone. Great to not see you, but great to know you're in the background. So normally we would be in Singapore at the Value Lab, at the Future Cities Lab, where we would have this final conference. Now we do it in an online form, which I think is very worthwhile a try. I think it's very interesting to see where people are able to join using this online form. So yeah, let's do it this way, and I hope we can get a good discussion then afterwards anyway. So thank you very much for joining. I'm happy to present what MuSES is about. MuSES evolved from basically two streams. The first was obviously the first 5 years of FCL1. We spent 5 years at the Future Cities Lab before we started MuSES. That gave us an idea about the context of Singapore and the tropics, and motivated our research further on the urban scale. And the second was we developed at ETH in Zurich, more an urban scale analysis, where Jimeno was originally also part in Zurich. And then those two streams combined to the MuSES research project within the Future Cities Lab for the past 5 years. So what motivates us? I think everyone in this virtual room probably knows already quite a bit about this. We know what is happening with cities. We know what is happening with urban growth. The image to the right shows it quite nicely. Already today, roughly 80% of the energy globally is consumed in urban areas. And when we look at the growth, this will be even further increasing. And this doesn't happen in the moderate climates where we come from, but it happens in the tropics and subtropics. So in hot and humid climates. So I think it's fair to say our future, the energy futures, and the future of cities is all kind of concentrated in this hot and humid climates. And of course, we know about climate change. We know about rising temperatures. We know that there's actually cities around the tropics, India, for example, where the temperatures will be increasingly dangerous also for health. So it's fair to say that we can expect a global massive increase in cooling. In fact, it's foreseen that we will switch from a heating-dominated world to a cooling-dominated world. And this will happen in the next 15, 20 years. Alongside with this, we all realize that we need to transition to renewable energy systems. So we have to tackle both aspects. And of course, also for renewable energy systems, the question is, what is the role of cities and how do we transition to low carbon cities? Of course, both in operation as well as in other aspects, such as materials, but we focus on the operational side. And how does this transition impact buildings and the energy systems? That was kind of the key motivation, the key guiding questions when we started the MuSES project. background, maybe in FCL 1 with 342, we did a project on a building scale where we implemented a new approach for cooling, for very efficient cooling, where we could show that we could reduce the cooling energy demand and the total energy demand of buildings by roughly 2/3 by introducing new technology. And that was kind of the backdrop, also the question, what would happen if we would scale up something like that? So the research questions for MuSES when we started was exactly that. What are efficient district scale cooling systems? And how can they be optimally driven by renewable energy systems? Kind of what would happen if we would upscale? And it was quite clear that there will be interesting interactions, and we were wondering what would be the critical interactions between energy systems, urban design, and urban planning be. So between all the aspects that make a city and that are designed and decided by urban planners and by authorities, and normally separate the infrastructures behind it. Third part was we thought it needs a better understanding how the occupants actually use the city. We know very much about how to deal with occupants on a building scale, but 5 years ago it was very clear that we're missing approaches and ideas how to scale this up, because obviously a city is more than just an aggregation of buildings, and we would like to tackle that. And then last but not least, how do we embed such knowledge, if we have it, into design and planning decisions? What are the environments that help decision makers actually to, at the end, design and build better cities? This is how the project was structured in 4 sub-projects, as Jimeno has introduced it. The first on the demand side. Demand, of course, why do we need energy in the first place? Is because people need it. Not buildings, but people. So we need to understand, how do people move in the city? What do they need at which times? And what could we do if we think about new sources of data of assessing that? Second part, of course, then more on the systems perspective, also with François Maréchal joining us, who I will introduce in a couple of minutes. So what are future low carbon cooling systems for districts, kind of scaling up from this idea that we did in 342. The third was the energy driven urban design. So if we would take it to the extreme, I think you can always learn something if you take things to the extreme. It's clear that it will not be built or realized that way, but you can understand quite a bit. For example, what would happen if we would view everything through the lens of energy? What would be energy driven urban design? Which decisions would you take if you just take it from this perspective? And then fourth, of course, a big part of our work was the City Energy Analyst, an open source toolset where we try to cram in all the research and all the models that we've done, potentially for everyone else to use it, and to go a step closer towards realizing these types of cities. So let me introduce the panelists and the team members, of course, and the bot at the top row is actually the most important one. Our PhD researchers and sub-project leaders, Gabriel Hable, working on demand and data side, Shan Xie, working on the energy systems, Zhongming Xi, working on the energy-driven urban design, and Jimeno Fonseca as postdoc and senior researcher leading this entire project and coordinating this. We were supported quite massively by our programming and software experts, Reynold Mock and Darren Thomas in Singapore as well as in Zurich, that helped us to establish this computational environment that everyone at the end then used. I was happy to be leading that and giving some feedback and advice, and with me was François Maréchal from EPFL. I'd like to quickly hand over to introduce himself and share his views on the project. So François, if you're with us.
Yes, I'm with you. I'm starting my camera. So thank you for the introduction. So I'm François Maréchal. I'm from Switzerland in Lausanne. In fact, I'm located in Sion, 100 kilometers from Lausanne, French-speaking part of Switzerland. And what we are doing in my group is mainly developing methods for the decision support in the system engineering perspectives. So we have applications in the industry, applications in the urban systems. And so what were our goals in this project were really to understand how we have to analyze the problem and learn from some of the applications, the way to state the design problem. So what I see as being the challenges is that we have to, at the end, harvest, store, manage, and use the energy. And we have to formulate the problem in the reverse way, so understand what is the demand. And as soon as we have stated the problem of the demand, there was something which was really interesting, is the use of the exergy. That was also a concept introduced by Arno with a 3 for 2 concept, which then asked the questions about the relationship with the environment. And so it was really then understood that it was needed to do a system analysis, understanding the demands, and then from there going to the storage capacities, and then from there going to the conversion, the energy conversion, and then harvesting renewable energy where it can be harvested, and especially where we can find sources in the environment. And so, and this is what we did with especially with Shanshan, but Shanshan did use all the contributions of the others, so that finally it shows that it's very important to have this system vision if we want to decarbonize the cities.
All right. Thank you very much, François, for sharing that. And you raised an important point, which I didn't mention so far. What is unique about the setup is that maybe different to other research projects is that we have a very interdisciplinary setup. So our PhDs, as well as the project leads, come from different backgrounds. We have people from architecture, from energy sciences, from mechanical engineering, from urban design, which was by design. So we thought, okay, if we want to tackle those problems, we need to get people from different backgrounds into one room and work on this for a couple of years. And it was I think a very interesting experience, and maybe our PhD students can share it then afterwards also in the discussion. Because of course, first that makes things more difficult. You need to find a common language, how you communicate, you need to understand what the other person is talking about. And it's not for everyone. At the beginning, I think it's a challenge to get into, but it was very interesting for me to see how then things converged and how there was kind of a common language established, and how much especially the PhDs then supported each other in working on their project. And for me, that was a very interesting experiment, and I would be interested then afterwards also to talk with everyone in the panel about this experience. Is this now good? Are we going somewhere? Or is this something that we should do different in the future? For me, it was an extremely enriching experience. Okay, then let me switch to the outcome. Of course, the main outcome will all be presented by the PhD students much more in detail, and they did all the work. So I'm just summarizing at this point. So, of course, what the aim was as a scientific research group, we wanted to produce research that ended up in papers, journal and conference papers, and I think we did well on that. I think we have something around 20 plus research papers published in the state-of-the-art journals that were nicely reviewed. It was not always easy, I have to say, mainly because we try to view things more from an interdisciplinary point of view. And still in the publishing landscape, that is something that is not always digested well. One big contribution, of course, is software. The City Energy Analyst is an open source software. The idea behind that is that we had years and years of research of software that people developed in the group that never made a life after the dissertation, which is absolutely sad because there's so much work and so much brains in it. So we said from the beginning on, whatever we do, we want to open source it. We want to have as many people as possible contributing and using that. And also in this aspect, it was an absolute new experience for us with, again, pros and cons, and Jimena will go into that then later. We had, of course, PhDs, and we had master students, quite a bunch of them, and they greatly contributed. They also enjoyed this stay in Singapore, and they became good parts of the team. And we will see presentations of running master students then in the afternoon, a little later. We try to also explore how do we train actually people outside, practitioners, for example, at the Urban Redevelopment Authority, other institutions, the right to C4 images of what we call the executive course, where we had 15, 16 participants from different institutions in Singapore and from other parts of the world, learning how to do urban energy systems design with the city energy analyst. That was a huge experience, also quite a strain, but I think after all, it was, for us, it was a big insight. We had 3 times our district energy systems roundtable, which we installed to reach out, and it was quite interesting how it developed at the beginning. Also our invitees from practice were maybe not that interested or maybe not that willing to share, but that has greatly developed. We learned a lot from people outside of FCL coming to this district roundtable and sharing their perspectives from practice, also from other countries, from other parts of research. So that has always been a highlight. And of course, there were some awards attached to that. That's the hard facts. But maybe just a personal feedback on the insights from my perspective, being in this project for the last 5 years now. And I think it has become even more clear that if we want to design and conceptualize future cities, they must be designed with the energy systems in mind. Otherwise, there's no chance of reaching the societal goals we have set ourselves, right? We know this very nicely from the 2000 watt society in Switzerland, where from MuSES we could already show, we had some indicators that if you don't look at this in an integrated way, there's not even a slight chance that you would reach your societal goals. The same also in Singapore, we could show nicely what the interdependencies are on how you program a city, so what functions there are in the city, which densities, and what your potential for renewable energy, for example, is, and by that, what your carbon mitigation potential is. And considering these interactions between those different domains, building, forum, uses, density, supply systems, occupant behavior, I think is crucial for an understanding, because in a system, everything is connected. And we found out in this research that not everything matters, but some points matter quite a bit. And of course, the increasing amount of data we have available will help us following this path. And we will see this in the presentations afterwards. One problem we face with cities as compared to buildings is that the access, of course, is where we were in buildings maybe 30 years ago. It's very hard to get these forms of data to actually validate our models, build new models, and get the ground truth. Transition and development processes happen over enormous amounts of time, which makes it very difficult. But there's an increasing amount, and Gerd Schmidt, I think, who's joining with us, is working very hard on the smart city that has an increasing amount of data. So we hope very much that we can also tap into this for our research. And it was quite clear that if we want to build those cities, we have to empower the end decision making by these analytics and tool sets, such as the city energy analyst. However, in the talks we had over the last 3-4 years, it was quite clear that the current planning processes are not up to this yet. We have very linear planning process. We have step by step, each one does their own little thing, and it's by no means integrated yet. And this will be massively challenging in any context, be it Zurich, Switzerland, or Singapore then. Okay, but MuSES was also something different, and I'd like to share with you my insights, what I personally had from MuSES, and this is related to all the people that sit up there on the panel. First of all, a fantastic team, great team, with very diverse backgrounds, and it was very interesting for me to see how it converges, and they all worked extremely hard. I'm very grateful not only for the PhD work, but also for the work they put into the city energy analyst, the executive courses, all those things that normally don't make a PhD, but at the end need everyone involved to do that. I have to say the project only ran that well because it was extremely well led by Jimeno, who introduced the new forms of management to us, and that, I think it was very successful. Over the duration, we had great guests. Some of them are with us today in the video chat. Christian Schaffner and Matthias Sulzer, for example, but also others that enriched our work and gave us feedback. I'm very grateful for that. MuSES also meant a lot of hours of video conferencing. So what you see right now is standard business for the past 5 years. And there's some pros and cons to it. But we can say, hey, we were prepared for Corona. It also means a lot of miles in airplanes, and we have to question, is that the consequence? How do we deal with this? awareness of flight travel has risen quite a bit over the last years, and you can do a lot with video conferencing, but you can't do everything. So there's still a lot of air travel. And last but not least, I enjoyed every time I was in Singapore because it's the best place when you actually want to have good food. And I want to thank everyone involved. I want to thank SEC FCL for supporting us on this. We received great support. Thank you all, and I'm very much looking forward to the content presentations now. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you, Arno. Thank you very much for that. I would like to go ahead and just ask a few questions, maybe say aloud some questions that the audience has. We have one question, anonymous attendee. So here, Mr. Anonymous or Mrs. asks, have the systems developed been used in Singapore by agencies?
Yeah, so we've been since the beginning in conversation with agencies in Singapore, with a couple of them, and there was intense discussions to what extent these type of tool sets can be used in the different agencies. And we had a range of meetings and coordinated meetings to embed these type of tool sets into the processes of agencies, which is not that easy. As I mentioned, it needs totally different processes to harness these type of tool sets. It needs also a certain background. I think most successful, and Jimeno, you can add to that. Most successful was the executive course, where we had people from different authorities also attending and getting their hands on these type of systems. But I think it's interesting that we still need to decide, or we still need to evolve if the model of this is actually an agency or an entity at an agency using these type of tool sets and analytics, or if this is more a model where you provide these type of analytics from external consultants. That is not entirely clear yet. Jimeno, you were on the front of discussing that. Maybe you want to add something to that.
No, yeah, I mean, just to, if anything, complemented is I think it has to go with the idea that the processes we are introducing are sometimes new. I think we did our best to accommodate them to current practice, but still there is, as you mentioned at the beginning, there is some things to do in terms of changing ways of thinking. For example, on one clear point is about how practitioners address the issue of optimization, using tools for optimizing, running thousands of scenarios and getting the best result or close to the best. I think that's something that still is time consuming, that requires some expertise. But I think from this executive course, we made, let's say the first, we gave it like some first grains of sand needed to build up that expertise and that knowledge needed to change processes. And perhaps that's I think that's what I would say was part of the experience. Okay, good. All right, so we had another question, this time from Matthias Sulza. Matthias is asking, will MuSES continue in FCL2? And if so, in what form?
Yeah, maybe I can share some insight in that. So actually, what we are in right now and what we're ending is FCL2. So the National Research Foundation of Singapore launched this program 10 years ago with a 5-year project, and then the opportunity to do another 5-year project which was FCL1 and FCL2. And now this format, as it has been designed, runs out, and that's not only us, that's the entire CREATE, or most of CREATE that runs on this format. But of course, it's a great asset to have this experience in Singapore and to work in Singapore, from climate, from the city, from knowing people in Singapore and how they work. So of course, roughly 1.5 years ago, we started thinking about the afterlife, and we've we constructed a new form of research project that will not be FCL in its current form, but also a project that looks at urban scale urbanization between the moderate climates, Zurich, that is, and Singapore in the tropics. This is in the decision phase, in the review phase, and we expect that in the next months we get some word on this. But of course, we handed in a project that looks into deepening the methods and the insights we had in MuSES, focusing on some more specific aspects of it and trying to progress more in this direction. So very hopefully there will be a next MuSES.
Fantastic. Thank you, Arno. We have another question here. We are thinking about, well, there is this question by Ali Hainon from AIT, Vienna. He or she is asking, are the applied approaches just energy simulation, or you are also using optimization tools? When yes, which type of optimization? Which objective functions are addressed?
So I guess you're referring to CA, and there will be a presentation on CA which will roll out this in detail, and maybe you get the full insight then from Primeno presenting CA. It's the tool set itself is of course for simulation, but it also has optimization features embedded. But all the details then will be given by Primeno in this presentation, I would assume.
If I may just add something, is that the optimization is not the goal. So the goal is to identify good solutions, and therefore sometimes we will have optimization objective functions that will be cost. Sometimes it will be efficiency, and the goal is at the end to identify the good solutions and being convinced by those solutions. Meaning that at the end we will enter into a multi-criteria approach.
All right. Thank you for that, Arno and Francois. I think that's pretty much the answer to that question. We have time still for 2 more questions. One is by Christian Schaffner. So Christian is asking, how big is the community outside of FCL contributing to CA open source project? What are your experiences with the community?
Yeah, Jimeno, you're probably the best person answering that question, being engaged and interviewing the community on a frequent basis.
Yeah, sure. So I think until now, we're going to give a really detailed, more detailed answer to this question during the presentations. But in an overview, I could say that I mean, the experiences with the community have been quite broad in the sense of they have either started as a mini research projects that actually we have invited people to come here to Singapore and join us for some period of time. Some of them have led to also spin-off projects or satellite projects. And that's something that we will present during this this afternoon. Some of those projects basically stem out from this relation of the community of city energy analysts, as I like to call them, now the growing community of experts in this domain. And I will try to share a little bit more about those experiences during my talk, but I think it has been very rich experience with them. And right now we have people that we know of, about 200 at least, that use the platform. And we have received contributions in terms of code and development, as well as testing of about 20 plus people in the last 4 years, which is a significant number, acknowledging that this is a research project in its beginning, and that we managed to put software platform to be used by somebody else besides us as researchers, right? To make the public use it. So I think that's pretty much what I can contribute about that point. All right. Thank you for that, Christian. We have questions. Time for one more question, I believe. So this comes from Vibebab. I hope I pronounced it well. If not, just I'm sorry about this. Excuse me. So he says he works on predicting optimal build-up composition designs As a case, I have considered fire susceptibility driven build forms at city scale. I want to ask optimal energy driven build form can be different than a disaster driven build forms. It's interesting. How do such challenges can be met, especially from the point of view of a city planner?
That's maybe I can answer that, or try and answer that. I mean, that's a very exemplary question. Of course, if you plan a city, it's not only energy. There's a lot of things that you have as parameters, and ideally, and city planners ideally would have tool sets and methods to negotiate between those different objectives. Of course, energy is just one part of it, and it is an important part, but it's a huge and quite complicated problem to acknowledge all the different problems that you have, from transport, mobility, safety, fire safety, earthquakes. And the only thing I think we can do is provide methods to negotiate between those different goals at the end, and being able to inform your decision making. So just to switch from how it is done right now, where decisions are more or less made on an experience and gut basis, towards more analytical tool sets. And if you're working on that, hopefully you can provide means for city planners that they can integrate these type of considerations into the city planning and urban design. This will not be relevant, the same relevance for every place on Earth. That's why we need to be flexible which parameters we weigh the most in our planning decisions. But yeah, the only way I think we can go is embedding more of these analytics to make better design decisions.
If I may add something, there is also something which is very important in our approach with the system vision, is that we are always looking for synergies, and meaning that when we have more than one goal, then we create, in fact, by introducing new constraints or new objectives to the design, we also create opportunities for synergies. I would just give you one example on what Vaibhav is saying. So if we distribute the code with carbon dioxide, which is one of the options that have been evaluated, you have also carbon dioxide that can be used as a fire extinguisher. So it means that we would use an efficient design in energy, and at the same time be more safe in terms of fire. And this is something which is coming from the discussion and from the fact that we are trained in looking at the system as with the system in mind, in fact.
All right, thank you very much for that. Thank you once again, Arno, and thank you once again, Francois. I'm sorry, but we have to move on. Thank you once again to the panelists.